In the beginning, there was only silence, an endless expanse of darkness where the remnants of ancient stars drifted like dust. Then, slowly, within that cosmic hush, a cloud of starlight and gas began to stir. Gravity, patient, invisible, eternal, reached out across the void, drawing those fragments together in a delicate spiral of motion. Tiny grains of dust clung to one another, forming pebbles, stones, and eventually worlds. At the heart of that swirling nebula, pressure mounted until hydrogen ignited, and a new star was born. Our sun, bright, fierce, and young, burst into being, its light scattering across the cradle of creation. From its brilliance, the story of Earth began. Around this newborn sun, the debris of creation danced in a luminous disk of chaos. Rocks collided, merged, and shattered, each violent impact a spark of progress. Amid this cosmic dance, one glowing sphere began to take shape. Small at first, then growing layer upon layer as gravity bound it together. This was the Earth in her infancy, a molten, restless world of lava and fire. Her surface churned endlessly, and lightning split the heavy skies as ash and vapor swirled into the air. There were no oceans yet, no wind, no life, only the fierce heartbeat of a planet being forged. But the young Earth's story was to be shaped by something greater still. One day, a rogue world, a wandering planet born from the same dust, crossed her path. Their meeting was catastrophic. The collision was so immense that the very surface of Earth vaporized, and from the molten debris thrown into space, a smaller companion was born. That companion became the moon. Born of violence, it would become Earth's eternal guardian, gently pulling at her tides, calming her spin, and stabilizing her tilt. Without it, our nights would be darker, our seasons chaotic. From destruction came harmony. As eons passed, the Earth began to cool. Her fiery surface hardened into stone, though deep beneath, her heart still pulsed with molten life. Volcanoes rose and erupted, filling the air with gas, the first whispers of an atmosphere. Steam, carbon dioxide, and nitrogen billowed into the sky, thick and choking, until the heavens darkened and rain began to fall. It fell for centuries, hissing against the hot crust, filling craters, carving channels, and gathering into vast basins. From the sky's endless tears, the first oceans were born, shimmering under a copper sun. Imagine it, the first rain in all of history, falling upon a world that had never known water. Imagine the newborn seas, swirling with minerals and starlight, reflecting the fire of the sun. The earth, once red and molten, had become blue and living. Her clouds rolled low and heavy, and her air was thick with promise. Every wave that lapped against the young shore carried whispers of potential, the elements that, one day, would stir and awaken as life. But that moment had not yet come. For now, Earth was still learning to breathe. The molten plains cooled. The storms softened. And from the fractures of her crust, mountains rose like great stone exhalations. Slowly, patiently, the chaos settled into balance. The sun warmed her seas. The moon steadied her rhythm. And the earth found peace for the first time. If you could have stood upon her surface then, you would have seen no forests, no deserts, no creatures, only oceans stretching to the horizon, and a pale golden light glimmering through a haze of mist. You would have heard only the sound of waves and distant thunder, the soft lullaby of a planet coming into being. From dust and fire, the earth was born. From water and patience, she learned to endure. The universe looked on in quiet wonder as this small blue sphere, fragile, glowing, miraculous, began to dream. Beneath the oceans of vapor and the veil of storm clouds, the young earth continued to change. The chaos of her birth was softening, her molten heart slowing, though still beating deep within. The surface, once liquid fire, began to harden into a fragile crust, a thin shell stretched across a restless core. It crackled and hissed as it cooled, the pressure beneath forever trying to break free. For even as the earth grew calm above, she remained wild within. The world's interior divided itself, layer by patient layer. At the very center, the core, a sphere of molten metal, mostly iron and nickel, turned endlessly like a glowing heart beneath the stone. Around it lay the mantle, thick and shifting, its currents flowing like a slow tide of molten rock. Above that, the crust formed, delicate, brittle, yet strong enough to hold oceans and sky. Together, they made a living system, the planet's body, blood, and breath. The core gave warmth. The mantle gave movement. The crust gave shape. But this first crust was unstable, forever cracking and reforming. Volcanoes erupted through its seams, fountains of molten rock spilling into the air and hardening into black glass. From these volcanoes, continents began to rise, small, scattered islands of stone in a world still dominated by sea. They were rough, jagged, and empty, the first bones of a planet learning to stand. Over millions of years, those islands merged and split, building larger masses of land. What we now call continents were, in those days, little more than shifting rafts of rock adrift on a molten ocean. The land was not yet still. It moved, ever so slowly, rising where magma pushed upward, sinking where the crust cooled and grew heavy. With each movement, new mountains were built and old ones worn away. The wind began to whisper over stone, and the rain, ceaseless and pure, began its work. It fell onto mountains and carried fragments down into valleys, grinding the world into sand and soil. The earth was carving her own face, shaping her ridges and plains with patience only time could measure. Imagine it, the first mountains glowing red beneath a copper sky, rivers of lava turning to streams of rock. Imagine the land cooling under sheets of rain, the first true rivers beginning to flow. The air was thick with steam and ash, but light began to filter through, soft, golden, and full of promise. From the clash of fire and water, balance was born. Deep beneath these changes, the planet's mantle stirred, moving in slow, unseen waves. Heat rose from the core, setting the molten stone in motion. This was the beginning of Earth's great circulation, the breath of the planet itself. As heat moved upward, the crust fractured, allowing new rock to rise, while older crust sank and melted once more into the mantle. The earth was recycling her own body, endlessly renewing herself from within. Volcanoes grew in clusters, like vast scars across her surface. Each eruption poured out rivers of magma, layering the land thicker and stronger. Over time, volcanic chains built entire continents, first small, then mighty. The surface that had once been fragile and broken was now firm, capable of bearing the weight of oceans and storms. The earth was dressing herself in stone, covering her molten heart with a mantle of strength. But even strength gives way to change. The same forces that built the land also tore it apart. Mountains cracked, valleys sank, entire regions disappeared beneath the waves, only to rise again in a different form. This was the planet's secret rhythm: creation, destruction, rebirth. From fire and erosion, from pressure and release, new land was always waiting to emerge. Every grain of sand that would one day rest beneath your feet began here, forged in fire, carried by wind, worn down by time. Every mountain range, every valley, every quiet shore began as molten dreams reshaped by patience. The continents that now hold forests and cities were once shifting islands in a sea of fire, drifting slowly across the globe. The world was still young, but already she was breathing, her crust shifting like skin, her mantle flowing like blood, her heart glowing with heat. Through all of this, she was learning how to endure, how to bend without breaking. She was learning how to heal herself. And though no eyes yet watched her, the earth was beautiful beyond measure. Her surface gleaming with minerals, her skies a swirling dance of color and storm. Each volcano that erupted, each mountain that fell, was a note in the long song of her becoming. When at last the land grew steady and the rain softened into mist, the earth stood changed. The fires still burned below, but above, the world had found a fragile calm. The crust had become her living skin, ever-changing, always breathing, capable of endless renewal. And through that balance of fire and stone, the planet had prepared herself for her next great transformation. For soon, the first stirrings of life would awaken, drawn to the warmth of the sun, the coolness of water, and the quiet promise of land newly born. Beneath the calm surface of the ancient seas, the earth was never still. Her heart continued to burn. Her breath continued to flow. Deep within her mantle, vast rivers of molten rock moved in slow, rhythmic tides, waves that took millions of years to crest and fall. These unseen currents would become the great sculptors of her surface, shifting entire continents as effortlessly as a breeze stirs leaves upon a pond. The crust, which had cooled into a solid shell, was not one unbroken surface. It was a puzzle of colossal fragments, immense slabs of stone we now call tectonic plates. They rested upon the molten mantle below, floating, drifting, colliding. Each movement was slow beyond comprehension, inches a year, perhaps less, yet over eons. Those inches would change the very shape of the world. Once, there was no separation between the lands. No Europe, no Asia, no Americas or Africa. Only one vast supercontinent, Pangaea, a single body of stone wrapped in an endless ocean called Pandalasa. It stretched from pole to pole, an unbroken landscape of mountains, plains, and deserts beneath the ancient sun. To the north, snow and cold winds swept across great tundras. To the south, lush forests of towering ferns and primitive trees covered the lowlands. Across its center, the air shimmered with heat. Rivers as wide as seas carved valleys through the heart of this mighty land. But even as Pangaea stood whole, the forces beneath it were stirring. Beneath its weight, the mantle currents shifted and swirled. Slow, invisible hands pressing upward, pulling downward, straining at the seams. Over countless centuries, cracks began to form, deep fissures glowing faintly from the molten fire below. Steam rose from them, as though the earth were whispering in her sleep. The crust groaned, the first rift valleys opened, and the great continent began to tear itself apart. The separation was not sudden. It was graceful, like petals drifting from a flower in slow motion, carried by the gentle pull of time. One landmass divided into two, Laurasia to the north, Gondwana to the south. Between them, a newborn sea began to widen, the first hint of what would become the Atlantic Ocean. And as the waters filled the gap, the world's map began to change forever. Mountains rose where plates collided, folded upward like wrinkles on the skin of the earth. Deep trenches yawned where others pulled apart. Volcanoes erupted in fiery lines along their edges, molten scars marking the boundaries of creation. Where once there had been plains, mountain ranges now stood, some reaching higher than the clouds. Every rise and fall, every quake and tremor was part of the planet's quiet symphony of renewal. It is strange to think of continents as travelers. Yet that is what they are, colossal, patient voyagers crossing oceans of time. Africa, for instance, once nestled against the eastern shores of South America, like two pieces of a puzzle. India lay far to the south, adrift in the seas near Antarctica, before beginning her long, relentless journey northward, a voyage that would one day thrust up the Himalayas. Australia, once bound to Asia, slowly drifted east into solitude. Even now, the continents continue their migrations, moving just as they have since the world's beginning. Scientists, peering into ancient stone, discovered the hidden record of these journeys. Within layers of basalt and granite lie magnetic minerals, tiny compass needles frozen in time. When rock forms from cooling lava, those minerals align with the direction of the Earth's magnetic field. But the planet's magnetic poles have never stood still. Over eons, they have wandered, even reversed. The minerals captured those changes like pages in a cosmic diary. When geologists read them, they saw unmistakable evidence. The continents had drifted across the face of the world, their magnetic signatures pointing in directions that no longer matched their positions. The stones remembered what the earth herself forgot to speak aloud. From these clues, we learned that the crust floats on a restless mantle, a living ocean of molten stone. And though we think of the ground as unmoving, it too has tides. The slow surge of magma pushes the seafloor apart, New crust rises where molten rock cools, while old crust sinks back into the depths. This cycle, creation and consumption, is the beating heart of plate tectonics, the very breath of our world. As the continents drifted apart, climates shifted, winds changed, ocean currents were rerouted. Entire ecosystems were born and destroyed as mountains rose and seas vanished. Where land masses collided, the earth pushed upward into new heights. The Andes, the Alps, the Himalayas, each one a scar of ancient motion. And in every valley and plain below, life adapted to the changing face of the world. Imagine the planet as she must have appeared then, her surface a swirling mosaic of continents in motion. From high above, you would see glowing ribbons of molten rock tracing the seams between plates. Volcanoes would flicker like lanterns across the night side of the globe, their smoke drifting into the upper air. On the day side, the sun would gleam upon mountain peaks still forming, upon seas that stretched across new horizons. Even the sky itself was different, thicker, hazier, tinted with the breath of a living planet. There is something deeply humbling about this endless movement. The continents we walk upon, the mountains we think eternal, are merely moments in a grander cycle. The earth is never finished. She is always becoming. The land beneath us, solid and reassuring, is in truth a raft of stone drifting on a glowing sea. Every pebble, every cliff, every field is part of this vast, slow waltz. And yet, in that constant motion, there is harmony. Without drift, there would be no mountains to catch the rain, no valleys to cradle the rivers, no ocean trenches to cradle the deep. The ever-changing face of the earth sustains the balance of life, reshaping, renewing, creating new possibilities with every shift of stone. As the eons passed, the world began to take on shapes we would recognize today. The continents settled into their slow orbits around the globe, though settled is never the right word. For even now, Africa continues to move north, pressing against Europe to one day close the Mediterranean Sea. The Atlantic widens each year, quietly, invisibly. The Pacific shrinks. And deep below, the mantle currents still churn, patient, tireless, ancient. The earth moves in cycles far longer than any human lifetime. The mountains we see as eternal are merely waves caught mid-rise. The continents are dancers, turning slowly to a rhythm too deep for us to hear. But if we listen closely to the rumble of the ground after an earthquake, to the hiss of a distant volcano, to the whisper of the wind over stone, we might just sense it, the planet's heartbeat. It is the rhythm of creation, the echo of beginnings, the reminder that nothing upon this earth is truly still. Not the seas, not the sky, not even the land beneath our feet. And so, the world drifts onward, reshaping herself endlessly, her surface both fragile and indestructible. A living, breathing sculpture, carved by time, by fire, and by her own quiet will to endure. Before there were forests, before the rustle of leaves or the call of any creature, it was silence. The young earth had cooled enough for oceans to settle, vast, dark expanses that shimmered under the light of a gentle golden sun. From space, the world would have appeared calm now. Clouds drifting in lazy spirals, waters reflecting light like glass. Yet beneath that tranquil surface, in the hidden folds of the sea floor, something astonishing was stirring. It began in the deep, in the crushing darkness where sunlight could never reach. The planet's restless heart still glowed. There, fissures split the ocean floor, and from them rose black plumes of mineral-rich water, heated by magma far below. These hydrothermal vents, like underwater chimneys, spewed out warmth and chemicals, creating oases in an otherwise lifeless abyss. Around these vents, elements began to dance. Hydrogen, carbon, sulfur, simple ingredients of matter, collided and fused, shaped by heat and pressure into ever more complex arrangements. Tiny bubbles formed within mineral walls, acting as the first fragile chambers of separation, precursors to what would one day become cells. Within these sheltered pockets, chains of molecules grew longer, twisting and folding into shapes that could store information, react, and replicate. And then, almost imperceptibly, something new happened. A spark, not of lightning, but of organization. A pattern that could copy itself. From this spark came the first cell, a structure so small it would be invisible even to the naked eye of imagination, yet so significant that the universe itself seemed to shift in recognition. For the first time, matter could remember how to live. In these quiet beginnings, the first life forms were simple, single-celled beings, tiny envelopes of possibility adrift in the vast sea. They had no eyes, no limbs, no voices. Yet within them lay the future of forests and whales, of humans and songbirds, of every living thing that would ever walk, fly, or bloom. For countless millions of years, these microorganisms were the rulers of the world. The oceans were their realm, an endless floating kingdom of microscopic travelers. They fed on minerals and sunlight, multiplied endlessly, and learned to adapt. With every generation, they grew more intricate, more capable, more aware, not in thought, but in survival. Then, among these pioneers, a remarkable lineage emerged. Cyanobacteria, tiny architects that would transform the face of the planet. Unlike others, they learned to harness sunlight itself, using it to create energy. Through a process we now call photosynthesis, they consumed carbon dioxide and released oxygen as waste. At first, the oxygen had nowhere to go. The oceans absorbed it. The iron within the water rusted and sank, painting the sea floor in red. But slowly, over time, the balance shifted. Oxygen began to rise into the air. The sky, once tinted orange and hazy, began to clear. The very atmosphere transformed. This quiet, gradual event, spanning eons, is known as the Great Oxygenation, one of the most profound revolutions in Earth's history. It was not sudden or violent, yet its consequences were world-altering. The oxygen released by those humble cyanobacteria built up in the sky, forming a delicate shield, the ozone layer, that would one day protect life from the sun's harshest rays. The planet's air turned blue. The seas deepened in color. The surface cooled and stabilized. and for the first time, the earth truly breathed. But this transformation was not without cost. For many early life forms, oxygen was poison. Countless ancient microbes, adapted to a world without it, perished as their own creation changed the chemistry of their environment. Yet out of this quiet extinction rose resilience. New forms evolved, organisms that learned to use oxygen to fuel their inner fires, becoming more energetic, more complex. The earth was learning to live. In time, life moved beyond simplicity. Cells began to cooperate, merging into larger, more sophisticated entities. Some cells swallowed others and learned to coexist, forming partnerships that would give rise to the first eukaryotes, the ancestors of plants, fungi, and animals. Within these new beings, one cell became the energy center, another the guardian of information, and together they built intricate systems of purpose and balance. The oceans began to teem with microscopic diversity, an invisible bloom of creativity. Shapes multiplied. Some cells grew shells of silica or calcium. Others developed flagella to swim, or delicate filaments to sense their surroundings. They formed colonies, filaments, and floating mats, the precursors to coral reefs, kelp forests, and everything that would follow. As time stretched into billions of years, the sea itself became a cradle of color and movement. Light filtered through the shallows, scattering into beams that illuminated drifting blooms of plankton. Beneath them, mats of cyanobacteria carpeted the seafloor in rippling patterns. These humble colonies exhaled oxygen into the water and sky, continuing their ancient labor. They were, in a sense, gardeners tending to a planet that would one day bloom with forests and flowers. Then, something extraordinary occurred. Cells began to link together not just for survival, but for cooperation. From these bonds emerged multicellular life. At first, they were simple, small clusters of cells working as one. But over millions of years, specialization took root. Some cells became feeders, others defenders, still others transporters or sensors. Within these structures, the first primitive tissues formed. With them came form and function, the first hints of organs, movement, and purpose. The oceans awakened with motion. Tiny worms burrowed through soft mud. Jelly-like creatures floated, pulsing gently through the water. Simple algae and sponges anchored to rocks, filtering currents for sustenance. The earth, once silent, now whispered with the stirrings of life. By the time the Ediacaran seas shimmered beneath the young sun, the world had entered an age of wonder. The ocean floor blossomed with strange, soft-bodied creatures. Frond-like beings that waved in the current, flat discs that drifted lazily, and ribbed ovals that glowed faintly in the dim blue light. They had no bones, no shells, yet they were the ancestors of all who would come after. The diversity deepened. Life experimented. With form, with color, with survival. Some creatures clung to the seafloor, others drifted in open water, their translucent bodies catching sunlight like stained glass. The air above them grew richer with oxygen. The earth's cycles, tides, seasons, storms, shaped the rhythm of their existence. And all the while, Unseen but ever present, the planet itself nurtured this fragile experiment. The continents continued their slow drift, releasing minerals into the sea. Volcanoes added nutrients and warmth. Lightning and rain completed the endless exchange between sky and ocean. Everything, stone, water, air, and life, was in dialogue. By now, the once barren world had become a living organism in its own right. Its surface pulsed with chemistry, its atmosphere sang with oxygen, and its seas were alive with color and motion. From the smallest spark in a vent to the great unfolding of multicellular life, the journey of creation had reached a new horizon. The first life had not just appeared, it had endured. Against fire, ice, and time itself, it had learned to adapt, to change, to grow. And in doing so, it had transformed an empty world into a sanctuary. Beneath every grain of sand, within every drop of water, the legacy of that beginning remains. The air we breathe carries the size of cyanobacteria. The energy within us echoes the ancient partnerships of cells long vanished. The story of life is not something that happened once. It is happening still. Even now, when waves lap upon the shore, they carry within them the memory of the first breath of the world. That soft, imperceptible moment when chemistry became biology, and the universe, for the first time, looked back upon itself through living eyes. The earth never stopped changing. Even after life had taken root, the planet continued its endless breath of fire and frost, creation and destruction. For while life shaped the world too shaped life. In the great span of time that followed, the planet entered an era of transformation. The crust beneath the seas continued to move, drifting and colliding, building new lands and swallowing the old. Volcanoes exhaled gases into the air. Mountains rose, their peaks thrust into the clouds. Rivers carved through stone, and wind sculpted valleys from dust. With every passing eon, the world remade itself, never still, never content to remain as it was. The climate shifted like a tide. Long ages of warmth were followed by vast blankets of ice. The air thickened, then thinned. The seas rose and retreated. Deserts wandered across continents like great sleeping beasts. Forests of giant ferns gave way to open plains, and coral reefs migrated across the map of the world. Each change was slow, almost imperceptible, yet its consequence echoed through the story of every living thing. Once, the earth was covered in green. Enormous forests blanketed the land, towering tree ferns, horsetails, and mosses that reached as high as buildings do now. The air was thick with oxygen, and the world hummed with insects the size of birds. Dragonflies with wings as wide as a hawk's glided over swamps. Millipedes longer than a man crawled through the undergrowth. It was a planet of breath, lush, wet, and pulsing with life. From the seas, new creatures emerged. Finned forms dragged themselves onto the shores, their limbs awkward but determined. They breathed air, felt the heat of the sun, and began the great experiment of life upon land. In time, their descendants would become amphibians, reptiles, and eventually the great dynasties of creatures that ruled the continents. As the continents drifted, new climates emerged. The vast single landmass of Pangaea began to break apart, its fragments slowly spinning away across the globe. Ocean currents shifted, winds changed course, and ecosystems were reborn. Isolation became the sculptor of evolution. Species separated by mountains or seas adapted in unique ways, a symphony of diversity composed by distance and time. Then came the reign of the dinosaurs. From humble beginnings, they rose to dominate nearly every corner of the earth. Some were colossal, titans that shook the ground as they moved. Others were swift and feathered, darting through the undergrowth or gliding through the air. The world became a theater of giants. Lush jungles spread across the equator. Vast plains echoed with the calls of herds. In the ocean swam marine reptiles larger than buses, and in the skies, pterosaurs cast shadows over the waves. It was an age of abundance, a balance between predator and prey, earth and decay, heat and rain. The earth had reached one of its grandest expressions of life. Yet even in this golden age, change was at work. Deep within the crust, the planet prepared another act. Volcanoes began to stir again, releasing vast clouds of ash and gas into the atmosphere. The climate wavered. Oceans grew acidic. Entire food webs faltered. But the most dramatic shift of all would come from beyond the skies. 66 million years ago, the peace of the Cretaceous ended in a single instant. A piece of rock 6 miles wide struck the Earth with the force of billions of atomic bombs. It landed in what is now the Yucatan Peninsula, and in that moment, the sky itself caught fire. The shockwave rippled around the globe. Forests burned. Tsunamis rose taller than mountains. And when the firestorm ended, the world was plunged into darkness. Ash filled the atmosphere, blocking out the sun. The planet cooled. Photosynthesis ceased. For months, perhaps years, the earth slept beneath a shroud of night. The great dinosaurs, the monarchs of their age, could not survive the long winter that followed. One by one, their footsteps vanished from the mud. The era of giants was over. But the story did not end there. From the ashes, new forms awoke. Small, warm-blooded creatures, once living in the shadows of giants, began to thrive. The mammals, quick and clever, inherited a quieter world. They adapted to the forests that regrew, to the plains that spread once more across the continents. They nursed their young, sought shelter, and learned the art of endurance. The earth entered a gentler rhythm. Rain returned. Forests breathed again. Rivers traced new paths through soft soil, carrying life wherever they went. The sky, once blackened, turned blue again. And in this renewal, evolution began another grand chapter, one that would eventually lead to us. In these ages that followed, the world cycled once more through heat and cold. Ice crept from the poles, sculpting valleys and carving mountains. Entire continents trembled under the weight of glaciers, then thawed again. Species adapted, migrated, or disappeared. Mammoths roamed the tundra, woolly and vast. Saber-toothed cats stalked across frozen plains. Early humans huddled around fires, unaware that they were writing the newest verse in an ancient song. It is humbling to think that all of this, every tree, every ocean, every breath, was made possible by change. The earth has always been both creator and destroyer, sculptor and witness. Through extinction, it makes room for renewal. Through chaos, it births order. Even now, beneath our feet, the same rhythms continue. The continents drift imperceptibly. Volcanoes breathe. Ice retreats and returns. Life adjusts its sails to the winds of time. The story of the planet is not a tale of permanence. It is a symphony of motion, a delicate balance of endings and beginnings. And when we look up at the stars, we are reminded that our world, once a speck of dust circling a newborn sun, has endured every trial the cosmos could offer. Fire, ice, and darkness, and yet still glows with life. The great ages of change are not over. They never will be. For as long as the earth turns, the story continues, written in stone, carried by wind, and whispered by the waves that lap upon the shores of a living, breathing planet. The earth exhales once more, and the breath turns cold. From the poles, glaciers begin their slow descent, creeping across continents, burying valleys, and sculpting mountains into mirrors of ice. The planet's warmth withdraws, its heartbeat slows beneath a sheet of white silence. It is the age of ice, a time when the world itself seems to dream. Across the northern hemisphere, the land sleeps beneath frozen oceans. Entire forests vanish under the weight of snow. Herds of mammoths wander the tundra in search of dry grass that whispers beneath the frost. Saber-toothed cats stalk them in the blue shadows of glaciers. The air is sharp, thin, and still. But far to the south, at the edge of this frozen world, warmth still lingers. Africa, bathed in sunlight, remains the earth's open hand, a garden of life beneath skies of gold. Here, rivers run wide and clear. Herds of gazelles ripple across the plains like waves of light. Trees heavy with fruit bend toward the soil. Birds cry over the wetlands. Fish shimmer beneath the reeds. It is a paradise, the planet's beating heart, and the cradle of all humankind. Here, our ancestors rise and walk. They are not yet the conquerors of the world, only its children, barefoot upon its living skin. They build no monuments. They leave no cities. Their memory is written only in footprints left upon the mud, in handprints pressed upon the walls of ancient caves. Yet in those quiet lives, everything begins. They laugh, they love, they grieve, they learn. They sharpen stones and fashion tools from bone. They gather around firelight, telling stories to the night. And above them, the stars watch in silence, the same stars we know today, shining upon a smaller, wilder world. For a time, the earth is kind. The rains come each season. Rivers swell and recede, carrying promise to the plains. Crops of wild grain grow untended. The rhythm of life beats steady beneath the sun. But nothing on this planet stays the same forever. A shift begins. Subtle at first, the sun's path wavers, the oceans breathe differently, and the winds change their songs. The ice, still heavy in the north, begins to melt. Seas rise, climates rearrange, and the pattern of rain falters. The lush heart of Africa, once thick with forest and flower, begins to fade beneath the hotter sky. The rivers that once overflowed with fish now shrink into thin, glittering threads. The plains dry into dust. The paradise of green begins to turn to gold, and then to gray. And so, as the earth transforms, we move. Our ancestors do not know they are shaping history. They only follow what their hearts and stomachs demand. Water, food, shelter, life. The clouds drift northward, and so do they. They walk through forests that crumble into savannas, and across savannas that crumble into desert. The wind fills their lungs, the dust fills their feet, and the instinct to survive fills their souls. They move not as armies, but as families, small bands of wanderers, tracing the footsteps of the rain. They carry the wisdom of generations in their hands. How to make fire, how to read the sky, how to find water in a world that is forgetting how to give it. They follow herds of animals, antelope, elephants, wildebeests, across dry valleys and shimmering horizons. And as they walk, the earth opens new doors. With the weight of the ice lessening, seas retreat. Land bridges appear where once there were oceans, narrow paths of earth connecting continents like threads in a vast tapestry. Through one such bridge, humans cross from Africa into Arabia. From there, they spread east and north, step by step, generation by generation. They do not hurry. They do not even realize they are leaving their cradle behind. The migration takes millennia, a slow, patient wave that reshapes the destiny of the world. Through deserts of dust and storms of snow, they move onward, guided by hunger, curiosity, and the faint eternal whisper of survival. As they travel, the earth continues its slow breathing. Glaciers retreat, valleys flood, mountains rise anew. Volcanoes paint the skies with ash, and forests follow their fertile traces. The travelers adapt, changing not only where they live, but who they are. Skin darkens or pales, hair curls or straightens. Bodies grow leaner or broader. The earth etches her geography into their very being. They learn to clothe themselves in animal hides, to carve tools of bone and flint, to make fire from spark and patience. In the heart of winter, they discover shelter within caves, where they leave behind paintings, herds of red ochre horses, the silhouettes of hands, spirals of thought turned into art. It is here, perhaps, that we first begin to dream. And as the ice melts further, the world transforms once again. The great rivers swell, the Nile, the Tigris, the Indus, the Yellow River. They carve their way through fertile plains, spreading silt that glitters with promise. Humanity, now settled near these waters, begins to sow seeds instead of chasing them. Villages rise, then towns. The first sparks of civilization flicker beneath a forgiving sun. The Earth's changing face has drawn its children across every continent, to tundra and jungle, mountain and an island, From the warmth of Africa to the chill of the Arctic, humanity learns not just to survive, but to belong. Each migration, each settlement, is a verse in a greater story, the story of a species shaped by the weather, by hunger, and by wonder. We did not conquer the earth. We followed her. We followed the rivers when they flowed, and the grass when it grew. We followed the warmth when the ice receded. We followed the winds, the stars, the seasons. And in every place she led us, she gave us something in return: language, fire, art, and the memory of who we once were. When the glaciers finally withdrew for the last time, and the earth grew warmer again, the age of wandering gave birth to the age of settling. And from that long pilgrimage, civilization was born. Cities rose along the banks of rivers. Trade followed. Knowledge spread like pollen on the wind. The ancient bond between humankind and the planet deepened, a partnership written in soil and stone, in heartbeat and rainfall. The story of migration is not one of exile, but of return. For every step we took away from our cradle was, in truth, a step toward understanding the world we came from. We have always walked with the earth, not ahead of her. Her changes became our compass. Her silence became our song. And even now, as the ice comes and goes, as seas rise and forests fall, the rhythm continues. The same pulse that began when a few wanderers first looked up at the stars and decided to follow the rain. For the earth moves, and we move with her. It has always been so, and it will always be. At last, after 4.5 billion years of silence and song, the earth drew her first conscious breath. From dust, from oceans, from fire, life had been sculpting itself endlessly, preparing for this moment. And now the world looked upon itself through new eyes, the eyes of humankind. Fire was our first language with the universe. In the black belly of night, our ancestors gathered around its flickering dance. The flames were warmth against the cold, protection against the unseen. But they were also something more, a mirror reflecting our awakening minds. Within that fragile light, the first thoughts of forever were born. Stories rose with the smoke, curling toward the stars. Around those fires, humanity began to remember. Stone became our first companion. We shaped it into blades, into hammers, into homes. From it, we learned patience, the slow rhythm of carving meaning into matter. We watched rivers and carved their paths into our stories. We studied mountains and found gods among their peaks. We listened to thunder and imagined voices from the heavens. And in doing so, we began to speak not just to the earth, but for it. Language bloomed like a new sense, invisible yet infinite. It gave form to what could not be touched: dreams, fears, gratitude, and wonder. Through words, memory learned to travel. Through stories, the past learned to breathe. And thus, we began to build what no other creature had ever built before: a bridge across time. We learned the rhythm of the seasons, how the tilt of the earth turned winter into spring, death into rebirth. We watched the stars and realized they too had patterns, their constellations guiding us across oceans and deserts. In time, We found our reflection in the sky, believing ourselves children of both clay and light. Villages grew near rivers, then cities rose near seas. Stone gave way to brick, brick to metal, and metal to glass. The world became a tapestry of movement. People carrying fire, seed, and song to every corner of the globe. Every footprint, a signature upon the earth's surface. Every word, a ripple in the great current of time. But as we multiplied, we did not only shape the earth shaped us still. Its moods became our myths. Its storms became our warnings. Its silence taught us humility. Even now, beneath the hum of cities and the glitter of lights, the deep rhythm of the planet beats on, steady and ancient. We learned to dream. We painted the walls of caves with memories of hunts and spirits. We sang to the stars, asking where we came from, why we were here. We built temples of stone and glass to house our awe. And through it all, one truth endured. We were not apart from nature, but a continuation of her thought, her voice, even shape. Civilization expanded like the dawn itself, slow, golden, unstoppable. The earth watched as her children learned to till the soil, to bend rivers, to command wind and fire. She watched us stumble, rise, and stumble again. Through wars and wonders, through creation and destruction, we learned not only to survive, but to mean. And so, humanity became the mirror in which the earth could see her reflection. Through our eyes, she witnessed her own beauty. Through our music, she heard her own harmony. Through our exploration, she rediscovered herself. From the depths of the ocean to the edge of the sky. But to see is not always to understand. For with knowledge came responsibility, the quiet awareness that the same hands which built could also break. The same fire that warmed could burn. Yet perhaps this too was part of the grand design. To be aware is to choose. And the earth, through us, was learning to choose. We are, each of us, the latest whisper in a 4.5 billion year conversation. Between stone and sky, between ocean and flame. Our lives, brief as morning dew, are nonetheless echoes of that first molten heartbeat. When the wind moves through the grass, when a river bends through the valley, when the night sky reveals its billion-year-old light, the earth remembers every step that led to this moment. The birth of stars, the fall of rain, the hum of microbes, the tread of feet. And somewhere, among all that memory, a single truth hums quietly. We are not separate from this world. We are its dream awakened. So as you rest now, let that thought cradle you. The same atoms that burn in the heart of the sun dwell gently within your blood. The same water that filled the ancient seas still flows through your veins. You are made of earth, of time, of memory. You are the universe, looking back at itself and smiling. The story does not end here, for the earth is not a chapter to be closed, but a song that continues, soft, endless, eternal. Even now, the continents still drift. Beneath the crust, vast rivers of molten stone carry entire worlds upon their backs. Oceans rise and fall, as if breathing in time with the stars. The poles, too, will one day wander again, reversing north and south in the slow ballet of magnetic time. Mountains will be born from fire, only to crumble into dust and return once more to the sea. And so the cycle continues: creation, destruction, renewal. The rhythm of eternity played in stone, water, and wind. Above, the sky shifts from night to day, from season to season, yet beneath all change lies a perfect stillness, the heartbeat of a living world. Every raindrop, every breeze, every echo in a canyon is a reminder that the earth is alive, that she is breathing. In the quiet of deep time, she waits, patient, vast, unhurried. Her pulse beats through the roots of forests, through the tides that kiss the moonlit shore, through the magma that glows beneath the mountains. Every living thing, from the smallest cell to the tallest tree, moves to this same ancient rhythm. And somewhere in that harmony, we too belong. We are her voice, her hands, her fleeting thought made flesh. The atoms that compose us once danced within stars, once swam within seas, once lay buried in the dark heart of mountains. We are, and have always been, part of her becoming. Civilizations will rise and fall, just as mountains do. Languages will fade like wind across sand, but the earth will endure, remaking herself again and again, as she always has. Perhaps far into the future, when the continents form a new single land, when the skies burn with a redder sun, life will change once more. New beings will walk her surface and look to the heavens, wondering who came before them and whether the world remembers. And she will, for the earth never forgets. Every footprint, every whisper, every sigh of wind through leaves, all are recorded in her memory, through night and day, through storm and calm, turning, always turning, in a circle without end. Listen closely, and you might hear it, the soft hum beneath everything, the music of time itself. It is the same melody that began in the fires of creation, carried through oceans and forests, to the rise of humankind, and into the quiet of this very moment. The earth dreams on, and as we close our eyes, we return to that dream, to the warmth of her soil, the hush of her tides, the peace of her turning. We are not apart from her. We are her dream made real.